back to the Existential Lounge. Today we're going to be talking about our philosopher tier list. So in this list, this isn't necessarily going to be talking about the philosophers that we think are objectively the best, but ones that have resonated most with us, that we've really valued and have had the biggest impact on our lives.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to take into account the impacts they've had to the world of philosophy for sure, but I'm also trying to incorporate how they affected me, what they've done for me, how I've applied that to my life, and how they've changed just my overall worldview. And don't take this too serious, guys. It's just games. It's just for fun.
Yeah,
And if your favorite philosopher doesn't make it, leave them in the comments and tell us why we're terribly wrong.
yeah, definitely.
So we said we were going to do top 10, right? I had a few people I just couldn't leave off.
Let's hear
So
it. Yeah, yeah.
I have three honorable mentions to just rattle off real quick before we get into the actual top 10. My first one is Confucius. He's the founder of Confucianism. Has got his whole idea of just reaching what I guess they referred to as nirvana, that state of just goodness. And he did it through like these different things that I think apply to us today. So there's Ren, which is humanity, compassion, kindness, apathy, and empathy. Li, which is the social norms and manners and or the order of respect that it includes in society. Chao, which is the lineage and the respect for family and extent of all relationships. Yi, which is righteousness, morality, and Z, which is wisdom, knowledge, insight. Chin, honesty, and integrity. So those different aspects of being, they are things that I at least try, maybe not at a hyper conscious level every day, but just as we work through life, we want to have that that humanity and empathy towards the people around us, that lead the social norms, even though that sometimes it feels like we want to break those, there do have to be this somewhat rigid understanding of what society is and how we want to build that. Chow, the respect for lineage, I think is a huge, I think at least at a smaller level, I do have a want to leave something behind, a want to like have a stamp left. And I think that comes along with respecting that lineage, respecting that extent of what we are, and that extends in his ideas to all relationships. It doesn't only have to be bloodline necessarily, but just leaving that stamp on the people around you that matter. And I find it super important. Then the other ones seem to be more self-explanatory, stuff like Yi, which is your righteousness, your morality, the
Yeah.
want to always do something right, which we'll get later on into it. But other philosophers say that just that's not something you need to try to do. Just once you understand it, it becomes second nature to us.
Yeah.
Z, wisdom, knowledge. We always want to keep looking and learning. And then honesty and integrity.
Yeah, it's interesting how those tenets, those main ideas are so universal. Like not only amongst
Yeah.
time, but like with Western philosophers,
Yeah,
they shared a
definitely.
lot of those ideas, and how yeah, there's just this commonality that connects them, and that just seems like yeah, this just seems to be, if you have this going on or regularly implementing this in your life, you're on a good path.
Agreed, 100%. I think that something that all of these people that we're going to name here today have, which is remarkable, is this what appeared to be this insane level of foresight for what the human condition is
Yeah.
and would continue to be all
Yeah.
these thousands of years
It's
later.
timeless. Yeah.
It's insane. But my next honorable mention is, and this might give a little hints as to who might be on here later on, but I have Epictetus. I just think his life is awesome.
Yeah.
Dude was born a slave. He was born a slave, and his understanding and cultivation for stoicism came from the hand we're dealt is just the hand we gotta play.
Yeah.
I'm a slave. It'll be better eventually, or maybe it won't, but all I can do is work within the confines of what the now is. And I just find that level of self awareness, I don't know if that's the word I'm looking
I
for,
think it is definitely a big part of self awareness.
just that like acceptance, that like such a big part of stoicism is finding contentment, not trying to look for the bad or the great in life, but rather just being content, knowing that if I do my best, the best can only come.
Yeah.
And to one of the biggest things that I at least hope that is true in myself is that when faced with the worst situations of life, I will still be able to apply the ideas of stoicism. And I find it incredibly admirable that someone that was born a slave can do this.
Definitely.
It,
Yeah.
it's insane.
Yeah.
And lastly, I have Thomas Paine.
Okay.
So this is a little bit of uh, flavor of what's going to be on my list going forward is a bit of political philosophy. So the guys that founded our different ideas of political systems and things that we maybe they weren't right entirely. Just to throw out a few, like we all know that Adam Smith is Wealth of Nations is the foundation for capitalism. And then we have Karl Marx with the Communist Manifesto being the establishment of communism. I don't think either of those two schools of thought are entirely right, but I'd be damned if I'd say that both don't have stuff to pull from where we can create a more egalitarian society. But anyways, Thomas Paine, strong advocate for natural rights, a lot like John Locke, name you might see later, wanted a representative democracy over monarchy. Common Sense is his most famous work, which I just find it's kind of baller. Like these ideas, it's just common sense. His book was called Common Sense. So he found that, or he believed that hereditary monarchies were trash. The idea that your lineage is born to rule because some god said so is insane.
Yeah.
He has an awesome quote that I really enjoy. He says, "My country is the world and my religion is to do what is good." And that's really what our government systems should be.
Yeah.
What is the best we can do for the greatest amount of people?
Yeah.
And it just makes the most sense. He was a strong believer in the separation of church and state, untrusting of religion and dogma and superstition. Important to know that he did denounce he didn't denounce religious creation. He wasn't even necessarily saying it's not real. He just had the foresight, again, which I think is going to be a word we bring up a lot today, to see that it makes sense to divide that from legislation.
Yeah.
If we're going to be a multicultural society, and you got to think about early times, we're talking about leaving a monarchy and wanting to establish a thing that was more inclusive, Quakers, Puritans, etc. We have to be able to make a system of laws, a system of governance that excluded religion, because that's what they were leaving. That's what they were fleeing. And another one that I just find insane. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's also harder to govern with what America stands for, accepting and having people from all over the world.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for them to like go along with things if the governing body belongs to a particular religion explicitly, or has
Exactly.
those,
And
you
know what? I'll give it to the Christians. You guys, this country is founded mostly on religious principle.
correct.
It's founded on Christian principles of what is right and wrong. We later extrapolate it a lot more and have seen how we can come to the same conclusions without necessarily having a religious outlook on it. But at the time, our founding fathers, Christians, and I'll give it to you guys.
Yeah.
But what I think is important is that they rationalized the morality of the religion using secular thought. Our laws aren't written as don't murder because blah, blah, blah commandment said,
Yeah.
but rather they said, okay, we have a religious commandment to not kill, but we are going to write the legislation in a secular way as to why we shouldn't kill.
Yeah.
That way it applies to everybody.
Yeah, it's not just dogmatic.
Exactly.
There's reasonings behind it.
And lastly, for Thomas Paine, he was arguing for social welfare programs in the 1700s. In his writing, Agrarian Justice, he suggests universal basic income funded by land taxes. That's crazy.
Yeah.
In the 1700s, Thomas Paine was talking about a universal basic income.
Man was a forward thinker.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
All right. So that's my honorable mentions. Those are the guys that I just felt like if in making a list of my favorite philosophers, I didn't include them, I'd be doing it a disservice.
Fair.
So now I'm gonna go into my number 10, which
Yeah, go
is
for it. Let's
my
hear.
bit of a controversial one because most people might say he's not a philosopher at all.
Okay, I'm curious.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Didn't I call that earlier?
You did, you did. By the way, I don't think we know we said this, guys, but I haven't seen Brandon's list and he hasn't seen mine. So
Yeah.
as you guys are finding mine out and you're finding his out, we are also finding out each other.
This is crazy because when you said that someone on the list that isn't exactly a philosopher, the
Yeah.
first person that came to my mind was Da Vinci.
I mean,
He's a philosopher, at least not in the
he's not
in
a
the
classical
traditional
philosopher.
sense.
Yeah,
Correct.
he, however, had super awesome ideas that are 100% philosophical because he
Yes.
didn't have any tangible evidence for a lot of this.
Yeah.
So in a lot of his unpublished journals, which is where we get a lot of the insight into Da Vinci's mind, more so than just his artistic works and engineering works and mathematical works and poetic works and writing works, and we can keep going on here. It's Da
it's
Vinci,
crazy.
but his insights into how his brain thought, what he was thinking, was found in his unpublished journals. So he kept hundreds of just writings that are out there, and that's where we really get to see the philosophy of Leonardo da Vinci. So I have a few of the quotes from those writings that I think offer just an insight into how he thought. First is learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. So he saw intrinsic interconnectedness in everything, how every small thing was hyper dependent on everything else in order to function and be directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
He talked about and he applied this into his art. He talks a lot in his art about how this stroke of the paintbrush had to go in this direction depending on the way that the sun or the lighting in my painting is intended to be coming, because that is how this is connected to this. If I'm drawing a portrait, she should be squinting from this side depending on the light. The posture of like a certain muscle should be this way because the arm was resting in such a way. The mountain behind her needs to have more erosion on this side because it's closer to water, stuff like that. And he just saw that interconnectedness of everything. Next, I have that he explored a lot of ideas of consciousness, which is crazy. He called it sense comuna, which is, I'm assuming, Italian. I don't know.
Sounds Italian.
It could be Latin too. You know, they all wrote in Latin. He wrote in this thing, which roughly translates to common sense.
Okay.
And that's what because he never said consciousness. Granted, that word I don't think was even a thing yet.
Yeah, I wonder how that would have even thought of that as a concept.
He did. That's the thing. He called it what we would kind of translate today as common sense.
Yeah.
But when you look at what he was saying about common sense, he was talking about consciousness.
Yeah.
So he believed that this was a direct result of the sensory ability, the ability of the eyes sending messages to the brain, where it was then stored and created memories and knowledge. That's consciousness.
Yeah.
He thought that essentially, because you got to remember. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, to say common sense, I think in the traditional sense we wouldn't interpret it that way, but like common, I think of like the main hub, sense being perceptive capabilities, and so the hub of where senses come together, it kind of, you see what I'm saying? Like how I'm interpreting that word. Like we say common sense as in things that we should just know, but like to me, I'm interpreting that as like the hub of the main source of where our senses go to.
Yes,
to like,
and that's really what
experience.
he was exploring. So,
that's amazing.
So when he got when he was under the patronage of the Medici, he was given a lot of human bodies to dissect.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he writes about the most is this intrigue that he had with the brain. He kept tearing it apart, which again we can just talk about his insane foresight here. He was labeling different parts of the brain and assuming which parts were responsible for what. And the crazy thing is he was right on most of them.
That's insane.
I don't know how. I honestly do not understand how he would like say, this front part of the brain, it looks like the thing that does logic. Or this part looks like it's the part that stores memory. He somehow understood this.
I wonder how. I wonder what he put together to like make sense of that. Like, because you like different parts of the brain, they may look different, but really it's just a bunch of wrinkled mush. like what tools did he utilize and what knowledge did he have to determine like what experiments can you perform? Like you can't see brain activity.
You
know,
can't.
like we EKGs, we have like technological
Yeah.
instruments now that can like look at activity and also other methods of determining like how each part of the brain interacts with the other. Whereas then you have your hands, you have some like rough tools, and what else do you have? It's
Yeah.
insane how he came to those conclusions.
100%. Another line he has here from his writings is anyone who conducts an argument by appealing to authority is not using intelligence, he is using memory. So he was essentially saying he was an advocate for free thought. He
Yeah.
was saying the authority that is in place is not the adjudicator of truth or rationality that is within each and every one of you.
Yeah.
What's more philosophical than telling every single person think for yourself? That is the fundamental building block of what philosophy is.
No, absolutely. It's saying that is philosophy at its core, because to say this thing's illegal, and he would to the person that is just saying, well, it's wrong because the police says it's wrong. Well, it's like, well, that doesn't tell me why though.
Yeah.
That just tells me where it comes from, but not the why, that the building blocks to that why.
Exactly.
And for him to say, to urge people to like look deeper in that respect,
Yeah.
you're spreading philosophy. That's amazing.
100%. And then the last point that I had for him is that he had an argument that there was a link between aesthetics and beauty with epistemology. So he said this isn't just pretty to look at.
Yeah.
This is a commentary on the human condition.
Yeah.
The way that light bounces off of certain things, the way that different perspectives do something and change the entire meaning of the painting, the way that if I draw it or paint a different micro expression on said character, it invokes the agency, it evokes meaning and feeling behind this painting.
Yeah.
He used art as not only a medium for something to be beautiful to look at, but a medium to explore the human condition, explore what it is to be human.
Yeah.
Those little tiny micro things that change everything.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because artful creation, that's kind of the vehicle we utilize to express that which can't be expressed through words. Oftentimes we just feel super limited to like express feelings and states of human experience, that like there are just some things that transcend what words can capture. And it's amazing that he utilized in his creations deep understanding of science, deep understanding of science, and
At a time where this science didn't seem logical to understand.
yeah, and
So he was understanding complex science that wouldn't be common until hundreds of years later.
yeah.
Not using the scientific method, but literally just using intuition. That is philosophy. That is literally what philosophy is.
Yeah.
He intuitively saw the movements of different things and was concluding how those things interacted and somehow getting the right answer.
It's honestly scary.
It
like
is.
looking into the things that he was able to do blows my mind to think of, if we gave this man modern day scientific instruments, what would he be able to do?
Yeah, insane.
Like he would be a catalyst for propelling us hundreds of years into the future from where we presently are.
100%.
If he was able to educate himself on what we currently know, I would love to watch that. Like,
Yeah,
that'd
just
be
see what
insane.
he does.
Yeah.
I'd love to just be a fly on the wall. And the only reason he's number 10 on my list is because he's not a traditional philosopher.
Yeah, correct. I get that.
I,
for sure.
I would have him higher if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, he's one of the greatest humans of all time, though, without a doubt, for sure.
Definitely.
For mine, I have Friedrich Nietzsche.
Okay.
So there's this concept that he has that, like, ever since I was young, just puzzled me and filled me with curiosity. And he has this concept called the will to power. So essentially just states that all life is driven by a fundamental force, not survival, but a desire to expand, assert, and overcome. Like, I've always thought to myself, all life is fueled by this thing. Like, why does life want to live?
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling. Like, there is this universal driving force that in many ways unifies us, from the ant to bear to human.
Yeah.
Obviously it's more complex on the level of us, but it's
I
something
think it's seemingly complex. I think that's the thing that we often trick ourselves
Yeah, I
is
see
to
that.
think that it's more complex, but it seems that the agent is just making it seem more complex because we have a more complex thought process. So essentially, essentially the drive to want to exist, Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way thing.
Yeah.
That is the same drive that all these different organisms have.
Yeah.
The only difference is the way that the conscious, or not conscious, because not all of them are conscious, but the way that drive makes the organism fulfill that drive.
Yeah. We just fulfill it in, like, I guess,
It-
different
the,
ways.
The route that it needs to take for us to fulfill it is to trick
Yeah.
us into thinking that it's more complex.
I see that.
The less complicated the organism, the easier it is to just follow the instinct. But we are way more complicated than just to rely on instinct. We're not just fight or flight animals,
Yeah.
where we have way more going on. So in order for the organism to do what agent wants it to do, it has to make it think it's doing it for itself.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Yeah. So, like, he said that the will to power, it shows up as, like, ambition, creativity, and growth, like, not just brute force.
Yeah.
Like with humans, we create art, we do all these different things as an expression of this life force, and it's fascinating. It's really cool.
It really is.
Yeah. He had this idea also that I think is cool to think about. It's called eternal recurrence, and it's the idea of, would you live this same life over and over and over again? Like, let's say just on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
You get to, like, death. On your deathbed, you ask yourself, would I live this life on repeat? The answer is no. I guess in retrospect, there were some things you should have changed. But, like, we have the power right now to do that.
Exactly.
So I think that, like, asking ourselves that question regularly could be really useful. Is this something that we would want to relive? And, like, what actions could we implement now to make it more of a life that we would want to live on repeat?
Definitely. I think that reminds me, I don't want to misattribute the quote, but I think it was in a Chris Williamson video where he says that start today as if everything that's happening in your life didn't happen. Start today off fresh. You don't carry over the burdens of what you already messed up on.
Yeah.
Make believe that today is the start line and go from there.
Yeah.
And I think that applies there with
That's epic. Yeah. Just to real quick, so much of what we do in the past, I think that we pretend that we're starting from within a hole, and starting from -5 and getting to -2 feels so much more daunting than just going from, like, 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Like, positive 3 to 4.
Definitely.
And it can hold us back from action. It can really hold us back from action. And he had this other quote that I love. It's he who has a why can bear almost any how. And if we have a large enough reasoning for anything that is imbued with our passion, I mean, humans throughout history, you just look at, like, what they've been able to do through passion. We are unstoppable. We are, like, that is my favorite thing about humanity is when you have
creatures.
Yeah, when you have a human that has passion flowing through their veins.
Yeah,
man, like,
that's why, just as kind of a segue, but I love a good conspiracy as much as the next guy.
They're fun.
But I always feel this almost like disrespect towards us as humans when people try to say that we haven't created these amazing things that exist in history.
I see that.
When they
like
try
landing on the moon or something.
Yeah, landing on the moon, creating the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, all these different things. It's like, oh, aliens must have done it. Reptilian creatures or whatever you want to say.
You're just underestimating how amazing that we
Humans are awesome. And to say that they wouldn't be able to, I say we were once just land creatures until some two brothers said we're going to get us in the sky.
Yeah.
We were only on Earth until someone said we're going to go into orbit.
Someone thought something that the entire world would have looked at them in that moment and said, you're crazy.
Yes.
But it was that passion, that passion through their veins that, like, drove an action like that. That's crazy, the Wright brothers story. Them just, like, looking at birds and be like, how can we make this happen? And then just going.
Yeah, to go back to Da Vinci. Like,
Oh, yeah. His
some
helicopter.
Of the stuff, he had schematics for helicopters, gliding machines, tanks, all these different things that if we build them today, his schematics work.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. What's your number 10?
or my number 9.
Oh yeah, number 9. Excuse me.
So my number 9, the only reason he's here is because he's still alive, and I think that there is a certain air to the death of a philosopher that gives him a couple more points.
Okay.
Don't peek, I saw you.
I did peek a little. Let's hear it.
So I have Sam Harris here.
Nice.
Sam Harris, I think, has affected my life a lot more than a lot of the philosophers on this list.
Likewise, yeah.
He has so many different ideas that resonate so deeply with me, and he's introduced me to something that has helped my mental health more than I think anything else has. His meditation app, I recommend it to anyone. His approach to meditation, I recommend to anyone. Very few things have helped alleviate the stressors of existing as much as his approach to meditation, at least for me.
Likewise. I don't have him on my 1 to 10, but he would be 100% in my honorable mention. If not, honestly, now that I think about it, higher. Because if we're talking about people that have made the biggest impacts, like not only his insight, of course, I'm sure you're going to go into with free will.
100%,
that is a large speaking point on him. But since we're on meditation, he's done a lot. He's been practicing meditation for decades, gone on many, many, many retreats. His approaches are, I love how simple he makes meditation and also extremely complex. He throws in so much philosophy into meditation.
He has one of my personal favorite gifts an instructor can have, which is making a hyper complex topic approachable while continually not watering it down.
Yeah.
So many people can make a super complex topic easy. Like I can sit here and try to explain Schrodinger's cat to you guys, but I'm gonna dumb it down way too much to the point that I'm not even getting the full thing across.
Yeah.
Likewise, someone can get something fully across, but not make it approachable to the common person.
Correct.
Sam Harris has this way of speaking that encapsulates everything an idea includes, but also isn't over intellectualizing jargon.
I've honestly never heard him over intellectualize anything.
Yeah, agreed.
This man speaks in ways that like. I'm sure anyone listening, you've read philosophy before, heard like hyper intellectuals, like I'm just Jordan Peterson, for example.
Yeah.
People that can. No, nothing against him necessarily, but like
I think Jordan has awesome things,
but it can be hard to follow sometimes, and Sam really simplifies things, and I agree with what you said, not breaking down the original points,
just making it understandable.
Exactly.
And I think that's honestly one of my biggest pet peeves as someone who loves philosophy. That's one of my biggest pet peeves with philosophy, is that it feels like it's gate kept by over intellectualization.
I see that. Yeah.
I think that the reason that so many people aren't privy to these ideas is because we speak as never mind, I was about to say as philosophers. I don't want to put myself in that boat, but we speak from the academia world of philosophy from this high horse. Like you have to have a certain level of vocabulary or education to sit at our circle, and I just love that Sam Harris makes it so that anyone can sit at the circle. Download the app and I promise you will understand it. Nothing will seem like, what am I doing here? This is not normal. This is what did that word mean? Everything seems just human. It seems like conversation you have with a friend.
So it's interesting because you can do meditation for a while, and he exposes you to, even if you're like a seasoned meditator, approaches to meditation that you've never thought of before that almost feel alien.
Yeah.
The ways in which you could turn awareness in on itself, there are limitless ways, and it feels so creative. I never really looked at meditation as an art form until I was exposed to more of his work within the app Waking Up. I don't know if we said the name.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's called Waking Up.
We'll link it.
Yeah. He explores it. You just come to realize oftentimes we just believe, let me sit, let me focus on the breath. Or body scans, whatever it may be. The sheer amount of approaches that can be done with meditation.
I love the lectures that he has with other people.
So many
random people.
I'm really glad, because there's some amazing talks.
There really is. There is. Guys, download it.
It's amazing, for sure.
So the next thing I have for him, which again is something that has influenced my worldview to such an insane degree, is his school of thought of detaching morality from secular idea. I think that that's something that we need to be better at doing as a whole. I think that so many people say that, or believe at least, that morality is solely a thing that must come from a divine creator. But his book, The Moral Landscape,
Yeah.
I think is one of the best examples and the most approachable guides to how we can derive morality from secular thought. And I think it just, to go back to like when I was talking about Thomas Paine, it's one of those things that I think we need in governance. It's to understand that morality isn't judged by some divine creator, whichever one you choose to believe in, but rather that the morality that underlies our legal system is derived from secular thought.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's super useful to derive. The whole book is about deriving moral concepts from science and
Yeah.
and what that can show us, and um it almost makes it more simple, more just like in your face, obvious ways that are like, this just makes a lot of sense. Human flourishing, what is that? What does like human flourishing look like?
Mm-hmm.
How can that be achievable?
Yeah.
And you can find that there are um, ways in which we inherently operate. For instance, if you went through abuse every day when you're younger, you're physically reprimanded, and that happens to you every single day. There are more than likely going to be negative ramifications within
Yeah.
your mind. Uh, be it depression, anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
social issues. And we ask ourselves, well, wait, are those traits desirable for a flourishing populace, for a large body of people?
Yeah.
And we usually say no, because those impede upon um, advancements and connection, and they hold us back. So if we don't want those things, what are the things should we do? And then we look at what things create positive impacts,
Mm-hmm.
and then we just go with that thing. I think it's fascinating. You don't really, I mean, from my experience and what I've looked into, it seemed like he kind of took a leap and did a thing that maybe a lot of people were thinking but never actually published. I don't
Not
know.
much that I've seen. I mean,
Yeah, same.
Thomas Paine and John Locke do touch a little bit on those ideas of deriving legality from secular thought,
Yeah.
but I haven't read much other people that talk about morality being a thing that can come from secular thought.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so important because essentially you want to identify the goal. The secular goal for society is to benefit humanity the most it can. And that egalitarian view can only work within the confines of secular thought, because if we look at most religious doctrine, it'll say, love thy neighbor, be good to your friends, love your family, don't kill, etc., etc. But more times than not, and I even venture on to say always, there's always the caveat of if you're Christian, if you're Jewish, if you're Islamic, whatever it is that teaching is going at, it ends with, yes, follow all these things if the subject we're talking about follows this thing as well. Yeah. Whereas if we have this egalitarian view of society, we can more aptly apply all the morality that we are secularly deriving to everyone.
Yeah.
Then I want to touch on this just a little bit because this can become just way too long of a topic, but his view on atheism I think is awesome. Okay. His way of dismantling religious inconsistencies I think is admirable. Very few people can do it the way he does it without also coming off as disrespectful and demeaning to the people who believe the idea.
Dude is as chill as a cucumber all the time.
Yeah,
with these conversations.
Definitely.
It's a lot of that meditation paying off.
Yeah. And then he has this line in The End of Faith, the book The End of Faith, that I really like. The argument of faith without evidence is irrational and is dangerous and is a dangerous road that allows the manipulation of the masses.
Yeah.
And that's just what, as an atheist, admittedly, I view a lot of religion as. It's this manipulation of the masses through controlling what they believe and controlling their worldview.
Yeah.
If you can control the masses' worldview, you can control the way they act, the way they think, what they do, what they don't do, and
Where they put their money.
where they put their money, where they don't put their money, all of these things. And I just find, even if you are a theist or a deist, whatever you would apply to yourself, I think The End of Faith is a really good book. You guys should try it out. And then lastly, again, this can become a huge segue, but free will.
Yeah.
If you read his book, I'm sorry, I don't have it here, but he has a book on free will. I think it actually might just be called Free Will.
It's just called Free Will. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got like puppet strings in the words.
Yeah, that one, the red cover with the white
Yeah,
letters.
It's very small. It's you could finish that book in like a sitting and a half.
Yeah, and it's so jam-packed with just awesome worldview that has expanded my empathy further than I ever thought it can.
Yeah.
Once you realize that we're all just causal creatures of the circumstance in which we exist,
Yeah.
you can't help but feel bad for everyone.
Yeah, I think free will, learning that we don't have it, like to the true depth of its truthness.
Like fully embracing that idea.
Yeah.
That whole looking into the void and
Yeah.
like really just being okay with that.
For me, that if you want to find a way to increase your empathy, that is a steroid for that like capability, because you realize that if any person you look at, if you were dealt the same cards they were, you are everyone that is walking around you. The one person that you can't stand at work or in class or wherever, you would literally be doing the things you can't stand about them if only you were exposed to the same factors that cultivated that behavioral trait in them that you presently can't stand. But you only can't stand it because you're exposed to different ones that made you different.
If I throw mango and pineapple in a blender and I get a mango pineapple protein shake, I can't be mad that it's a mango pineapple protein shake because that's what's in the blender.
Yeah, I think that's a great simple way of looking at it, for sure.
Yeah.
We're wishing people were different when it's like if I throw a ball a certain distance with force, I'm mad at how far it went, but like it could have only gone how far I threw it. I had to throw it harder if I wanted to go further.
Exactly.
You know? And
things can only be the way they are based on the things that have affected it. And while admittedly I did already have this conception of free will pre-reading Sam Harris, his writings and teachings on it have expanded and reinforced that idea to such a higher degree that I couldn't be more thankful.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, who's your number 9?
Number 9, I got Epicurus.
Okay, nice.
So, honestly, I'm just going to come out with this. The thing that blows my mind is this dude, like, believed atoms were a thing.
Oh, yeah.
In a time where, like, you're wearing robes and just chilling out, you know? Like, where are you getting that everything is atoms? So, like, this is one of the earliest materialist philosophers, and he didn't believe souls were things, spirits, afterlife. This man just believed in matter and movement, vibration, and just little atoms just doing their thing, comprised everything.
Crazy.
I don't know where you're getting this from, but like, that man was beyond his time. That was fascinating.
That's insane. Yeah, I couldn't imagine how so many of these people on these lists have that insane foresight. Like, what?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm looking it up. When was this man alive?
Do it.
When was he alive?
I don't know the exact date. Pause for one moment. Epicure, is that the word?
When were you alive, my guy? 341 BC. Talk about cells.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know. You don't have microscopes. You don't have tools. You just got like the dirt under your fingernails and like, you know, what else are you working with? That's crazy.
Remind me, am I thinking of the wrong guy, or was he the one that theorized this by looking at jail cells?
No, I don't think that was him.
No, I know
No.
that there's a guy who had a
Yeah, I
conception of
remember that.
cells, and he did it by looking at jail cells.
I don't think so. I don't think that that was him.
Okay,
But that blew my mind. So I was like, you know
insane.
what? I'm giving you points for sure. He has a quote that both of us love. He was a champion of the idea that death is nothing to us. So the quote, when we exist, when we exist, death is not. And when
Oh,
death
yeah,
is, we
that's
are
it.
not.
That's it.
So it's amazing because it's like we fear this thing that we're never going to experience because there's nothing that is us to experience
For
it.
something to be painful, you have to be there to experience it.
Yeah.
Pain is a perception of an outside event, or
Yeah.
or perspective rather of an outside event.
Perception too.
Oh, perception
Yeah,
works.
yeah, it
Okay,
works.
cool. Yeah, and if you're not there to perceive the outside event, then there is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's nothing to death is literally nothing to fear. I think it's the moments leading up to death, the thinking of it's more like the irrational knee jerk like nothingness for eternity is like disturbing, but
Yeah.
like it's not. It's you know, I think the thing that calms me down the most with that is I already went through like potentially trillions or whatever since the universe began till like the year I was born.
Mm-hmm.
You were unfazed by it. You're unharmed. You're here. You're not filled with like, oh my god, that was so much time. Like, no, you just pop into existence, and the same way you just pop in, you're gonna pop out. And
Yeah.
so, thinking about that to me, I think is like top three, even arguably the biggest recipe argument for not fearing death.
Yeah, not only not fearing death, but making the most of life. I think that
Yes,
the
I like that. Yeah, go ahead.
the idea that there's something after allows for the complacency of this not being good enough.
Yes.
And when you really sit with the idea that this is it,
Yeah.
you got one shot, one opportunity. You really got to do everything you can to make it the
Yeah.
best you possibly can. And that's where I think a lot of people fail in seeing that, oh, you think you just die, you say you have such a grim view of reality. No, I have such an awesome view of reality because I only have this chance.
Yeah.
I can only do so much more because I know that I have one shot at doing it.
Yeah, we have philosophers on our list that pushed to consistently contemplate death
Yeah.
and the importance that we'll get into that. I'm sure we both have some of those people on our list, but yeah, I think death contemplation is so valuable, and it definitely turns it into a positive thing. So he believed that like this may sound controversial at first, but like pleasure is the highest good. Like, but what he meant by that is by calm, lasting peace of mind and freedom from pain. So like simple pleasures, not excessive ones. Like,
Yeah, I think that could easily get misconstrued as hedonism.
hedonism, yeah, it's not. So like that's where he oftentimes gets like misinterpreted, but he didn't mean hedonism. He didn't mean like go pursue the most pleasurable things. He just thought that like what we should pursue are things that like give us their end result is like this is nice.
I
I'm
think
okay.
that what we have to do in order to understand that the best, or at least try to get the most from what he was actually intending with the words, is reframing our definition of pleasure when we're talking about him specifically.
Yeah.
I think that we think of pleasure as these vices that we can get lost in.
Yeah.
His definition of pleasure seems to be more in line with our current definition of contentment.
I think what he literally meant, what is said within his writings, is pleasure equals no pain.
Exactly.
So like if you have no pain, that's a state of pleasure. That's something that you should be striving to achieve. Is
Yeah.
like a painless state.
Which again, I think is just so much more in line with what we conceive as contentment.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, I love those ideas, and I think that's awesome. I think that we're often striving. He made. I think he simplified a lot of that because oftentimes we think of what we should pursue is like big houses and vacations and all this stuff, and he was a champion of simple things. Good conversation, quality friendships. Good meals, like long walks on the beach. Like, he was just into things that didn't overstimulate the pleasure hub of our brain, but the things that really, if you look back on what made life worth it, it's those little things that add up. As like, I was content then.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
100% agree. I
Who's your next?
I didn't end up having him in there, but he would definitely be in my top whatever
Yeah,
because
he's epic.
yeah. My number 8 is Immanuel Kant. Um, so I love his distinction between phenomena and nomina.
Yes.
It's such a cool way of looking at reality because it's so encompassing of what's actually going on, as opposed to thinking that we ever see things for what they are. We see the computation that our brain has made of what the outside stimuli is.
Yes.
But we are never able to fully see the outside stimuli.
That's one of my favorite ideas that he's put forth. Also, it's fascinating because we are so instinctually egocentrical. So like, our automatic response is, what I'm seeing there is how things should be, and it intuitively feels like that's the case.
Yeah.
I'm looking at reality. I move this blanket and it's there. I'm looking at it as it is, but like, that's not how things work.
Yeah.
We have this very specifically constructed computer that looks at things in a very specific way, not how things actually exist external to us. So to realize that, I think is almost a form of enlightenment.
It is. It 100% is. It literally, if we see enlightenment as coming to realize deeper truths of the universe, that is definitely a deeper truth of the universe that most people don't seem to be privy to.
Absolutely.
That idea that things exist in a way that we'll never ever be able to fully encapsulate.
Yeah.
We essentially see the world through a limited lens that doesn't allow us to see the thing that it really is in front of us.
Yeah.
I think to make it more simple, just instead of thinking of like more abstract things like color, where we're like, maybe the orange on that box is not quite the orange I'm seeing because of some limitation in my ability to perceive color. But think of just simply this thing in front of us. We're seeing nothing, but there's so much going on right here.
Yeah.
How can I say that I'm actually looking at reality in front of me when I'm not even seeing the very thing that I'm in?
What is that thing that you said? Snails don't have like a sense of smell?
Yeah,
So, like,
100%. So there's the idea that, like, we know because we all have noses and humans have the capacity to smell that things have scent, right? So we know this to be a universal truth. However, snails don't have the capability to smell. So to them, that aspect of reality is shut off forever.
Yeah.
Now, let's extrapolate that a little bit let's just dip everyone in with some existential dread.
Yeah.
What is out there that we don't have the capacity to sense?
Yeah.
What is the thing that we don't have the tool, in much in the same way that a snail doesn't have the tool of the nose?
Yeah. I mean, that's like, imagine what we say we have 5 senses. Imagine like thousands. Imagine like millions.
We have no idea. And those are things that we can't explore because no matter what we do, we won't have the tools for those things. Yeah. We can never know. We can never know.
Yeah, we can increase certain senses like our sight with microscopes and telescopes, but there could be other forms of sensing that if we just do not have the hardware built into us to like experience, we're not experiencing it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy. It's like the whole, like, think of a color you've never seen before, or like think of a sense that you just don't have. It's strange,
Yeah. It's insane. And that's why I have him at my number 8. I just find that distinction to be so important when trying to get as close as we can to the truth with the limited vehicle we have of the human body.
Yeah.
Realizing that the strive for truth is paradoxical in that it is fruitless but so fruitful. It's for me personally, and I think applies to you as well, the biggest driver for continuing, the biggest push to continue going is that finding just more truth, trying to understand the thing that's out here, but realizing at the same time that is a endless endeavor, because no matter how hard we try, we are limited in the vehicle of which we are in.
It gives me a lot of like Myth of Sisyphus vibes.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll get into him later. But who's your number 8?
I have, and I forget to pronounce the last name. Jean-Paul Sartre or Sartre?
I think it's Sartre.
Is it Sartre?
I think so.
Okay, it might be. So I just fell in love with his description of like existentialism and being faced with, like he wrote this story Nausea, and
That's such a fitting name for existential dread.
it really is. In the story, like there's this, it talks about this one guy and he's like on this bus or this train and he like looks at a chair and like it's normal at first, but then suddenly he like jumps back and he's like, this is insane. Like, and he sees it and it's like primal, like objective as close as we can get state without preconceived notions of like what is a chair, what is it used for, and seeing this like just combined pieces of these like slots that like were, you know, munched up tree pieces. And I think that you and I both have experienced that so much in our lives where, and it can happen randomly throughout the day where like that kind of, I think the best way to view it is being like, you've never lived before and you're suddenly just thrown into this moment in time and you're seeing things play out, and it feels like you're dropped into some Dr. Seuss night terror world of like nothing makes sense and anything only makes sense because you are exposed to it, and we've ascribed concepts to these things to like help them fit in our brains more easily. As like,
peel back the veil of normalcy that we have on reality and you just go insane.
I promise you there is no fiction that you can think of that is more wild than the room you're currently sitting in. Like there isn't. It could be a white walled nothing in it room, and it'll blow your mind. And that's just another thing that like Sam Harris talks actually a lot about in his meditations, is really looking at things, taking the moment to like peel back that veil of normalcy and relevancy, relativity. And it's like you can become mind blown over anything. Over a leaf falling from a tree, over literally anything.
Everything is insane. Like you were saying, there's not a world of fiction. There is not a universe that any comic book writer can write that is crazier than the thing we exist in.
Yeah. 100%.
This thing is insane.
It is.
Just go into like existential crisis right now.
I mean, hey, we're in the lounge. It's the place to do it.
This is the one.
So he has this other idea that I find really interesting that I've never heard before, but it's called the look. So it was described as a transformative experience where others perceive us as objects, being in itself, things that exist independently of consciousness. So you have no power over how they perceive you. There's a struggle to be seen as yourself or how you want to be seen. But it's interesting because we are a being, and when we realize we're being looked at, we're sort of an object. Like, we're a being, but like now we're an object in someone's view, and like our beingness, we're not like being in a sense anymore. We're something in an observation where like being kind of seizes, and we're just something in another plane's, someone else's field of view.
You know, I think that, and this is something we'll get in with my next guy, but the idea that being only happens in the presence of an observer, that I think is what makes that concept so jarring to us, because we are constantly observing ourselves and that's why we think we are being. But in reality, our consciousness in a vacuum doesn't exist because it only exists insofar as something else is observing it. The tree that fell in the middle never fell. The cat that is in the box in Schrodinger's cat is both dead and alive because it exists in that state of superposition. And we are not a thing. We're not a being until someone is looking at us, until someone is perceiving the thing that is you. You are just movements of vibrating things put together. But you don't become you until someone sees Brandon.
Or my own,
or your own perception of yourself.
It's crazy. But so he had this other idea that was big for him, which is existence precedes essence. So like he believed there was no pre-written human nature. So like for instance, a complete opposite of a human in this existence precedes essence thing is like like where essence precedes existence is like a scissors.
Yeah.
You know, like what it was made for or what it's going to be made for is already kind of inscribed in it before it's even fully made. It's
Yeah.
like I'm making this for this purpose, so this is what it's going to be. But humans, he thought, are like these blank slates that like once they're just shot into the world, they can like cultivate their own like what am I here to do? And I'm gonna like I'm it hasn't already been selected for me. I'm gonna figure this out and then do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is something that I've personally dubbed the blank canvas syndrome, where we're just this thing that happens to exist. We're this hyper malleable thing we call consciousness that slowly but surely starts getting molded into what we are the more we just experience existing.
Yeah. So the only, I mean, I'm sure there are more because like I don't know all of his work, but he did believe in free will, and he believed that like freedom was this really big concept to him, like that. No matter what happens to you, no matter like your circumstance or anything, you will always have the freedom to do anything. And that's something that always kind of like rubbed me the wrong way, just because I felt like it was a constricted perspective of circumstance. Like
Yeah.
I something it reminds me of those people that like they look at people born in poverty and they're just like, oh well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and change your circumstance. You could do anything. Like we're not limited in life. He kind of had at least from what I've read from him, that kind of perspective, this like really overbearing sense of like we have unlimited freedom and that gives you so much responsibility to like you have to do everything with it or anything with it. And it's kind of like I don't know, that changes when you realize like the degree of freedom that
100%.
actually
Yeah,
have.
100%.
All right, who's your next person?
All right. So number 7, I have a pretty big guy here. Stop looking. Stop looking. Let me give my drum roll.
Go for
Rene
it.
Descartes.
All right, nice.
All right. So, give me some leeway in the pronunciation, but je pense donc je suis.
Cogito ergo sum.
Cogito ergo sum, I think, is one of the most fundamental building blocks of Western philosophy. It would be almost just an injustice to not have him in a top 10 list of philosophers.
Yeah.
It is one of the most important pieces of skepticism, which is so fundamental to philosophy itself.
Yeah.
Is this constant skepticism towards reality to keep etching away at the stone that is the universe until you got some truth left. And you can't do that unless you realize that the thing that is doing it is a thing. And that's what he said. He's the most cosmic level skeptic that exists. He didn't think anything was real, had the whole evil genius theory where the world's run by an evil demon that only wants bad for you. And he got to the conclusion because he became such a hyper skeptic that he started to not believe that he was real. He started to believe that I don't exist. If I don't know that anything exists, how do I know I exist?
Yeah.
And then he thought, there is something that thinks it doesn't exist or doesn't know that it doesn't exist. There is something there. In order for something to be thinking, there must be a thing that is doing the thinking.
Yeah.
The verb of a sentence must have a subject.
Yeah.
That's where cogito ergo sum came in.
Yeah.
It's just such an important thing that I think it's fundamental to what philosophy is today.
Yeah, I remember first learning about him in philosophy courses, and it felt like recess. It just felt like the fun of questioning everything before learning about him. It like if you have fun doing that, learning more about Descartes is like, damn, you really see extents of how you can push that, and it's so fun. It's just fun philosophy.
It is.
Like so much of philosophy is like what's real and all this stuff, and he's the what is it, like just the main one of the main guys when it comes to something like that, one of the most popular for just completely turning reality up on its head, which is fun to do in moderation. But his ideas were amazing and really fun to like. I remember there was this one thing where he was sitting at his desk and he was looking out the window, and all I could see were like the tops of people's heads. They were like had not umbrellas, they had something I remember, and he was like, I can't even prove those are humans right now. Like all I don't
I
see
love
humans.
that level of
I just see like hats or whatever it may be, and like moving. Because if you're looking at them from above, all you see are like
Yeah.
dots and like color and all that. And
I can see something's moving, but I don't know what's moving underneath.
Exactly. I can't prove what that is. Yeah.
Something tells me that if Descartes was around now, he'd be wearing a tinfoil hat.
Yeah, or a straight jacket.
Oh my god. But one thing that I have here that confuses me a little bit about Descartes is
God?
Yeah, his inconsistency there.
Yeah.
It seems like his skepticism took a backseat to his faith, and I understand that faith is a really strong thing. It drives a lot of the way we think, the way we connect, the way we act, all that stuff. So, but it just seems like for a philosopher of his decree, I guess, like his level, stopping your main thing, which is skepticism, and drawing that line at your supposed creator seems like a contradiction.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder what drove him to do that. If it was like the comfort, like honestly.
So he tries to justify it. Mm-hmm. He does in all his stuff. He does try to justify it. He leads into the ontological argument, the idea that something that is so perfect cannot be made by imperfect creatures like us. Yeah. So therefore, that perfect must exist outside of time and space.
Correct.
And to be honest, I think that's a weak argument.
It is. I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, what was his name? I'm gonna say the wrong name. Now it's gonna the comic book fans are gonna come after me. Mm-hmm. It was definitely not Jack Kirby. Whoever created Superman.
I don't know. Yeah.
He clearly wasn't a Kryptonian. He clearly didn't have the powers of everything, but he created this fictitious thing. Why can't us flawed creatures create the idea of a god?
Yeah.
That argument just doesn't make much sense to me. Nonetheless, I think that his contributions to philosophy through the concept of I think, therefore I am are so monumental that they overshadow his inconsistency in the application of that.
Yeah.
But that's why he's at number 7 and not higher for me.
Yeah, I think that statement has always been, and probably is for a lot of, philosopher lovers out there, a safety net, a guardrail. I think we need those when we think really critically about the absurdity and oddness of reality, that like in the face of all these existentialist, creepy concepts that turn everything on its head, cogito ergo sum has always been this like thing to hold that where it's like, look, I don't know if I exist as I am. It could be whole brain in a vat theory is true, and like this is all electrodes, and no one actually exists beyond me.
Simulation. This is zeros and ones.
All this stuff, yeah. But there is a kind of me that I can be sure is there
at some level,
some level, regardless of how it exists, why, whatever. That I can hold on to that, and it kind of feels like this one thing that we could just kind of grip to, and
I think that philosophy, and more specifically existential philosophy, is a thing that can really easily make you feel like you're free falling.
Correct.
It can make you feel like nothing makes sense, that you're just reaching to grab something and there's nothing to grab.
Yeah.
And he provides probably the most sturdy handle that there could be for those free fall moments, is that we don't know if we have free will. We don't know if there's intelligent design to the universe. We don't know if we're here by chance. We don't know if there's multiple universes where multiple of us exist. We don't know any of these things for certain. But we know that I'm here questioning them.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's something that I can stand on. There's not just this endless free fall.
Yeah. Yeah. That's comforting.
It is.
Honestly.
Until it's not.
Until it's not. Until you're like, well, why am I a thing that's able to question anything? Why? You just freak.
So who's your number 7?
Number 7 is Albert Camus.
Okay.
So I'm in love with existentialist philosophers. I've just always loved people that like look at the human
Like people can tell
experience
by
and
the name of our channel.
yes, yes. Yeah, I just love people that look at the void in the face and
Yeah.
try their best not to blink.
Yeah. So we did say we weren't going to do this where when someone says who their number is, if we have it later in,
Yeah.
we won't say it because it kind of ruins the flow of the video.
Yeah.
But he's number 6 for me. So
Okay.
it's like right there.
Okay. Yeah, fair. Do you want to just
Yeah, like we can just
because
both
they're that
go.
close? That makes
Yeah.
sense. So, he's just in something I love about him that we both are a part of. Or a part of, I say like it's a cult or something, but like the idea that
Might
we
as well
ascribe
be.
to, yeah, is optimistic nihilism.
Oh, yes.
Recognizing that,
Yes.
yeah, there is no meaning in the universe and that everything is just indifferent. And you know, if a massive meteor decided to like just annihilate Earth and destroy everything we've ever worked for and ever will accomplish, that like in the grand scheme of reality, it won't even look like a raindrop happened in the entirety of the universe. You know, if you zoom out far enough from us, you wouldn't have even seen something happened.
Yeah.
You know, the other aliens that exist out there in the hundreds of billions or quintillions, whatever that number, freaking mind-boggling thing is.
6 tillion.
Yeah, is
22 zeros.
they'd still be going about their day. You know,
Yeah.
nothing would change. So I absolutely love that about him. And it's like in the face of that, there's like this famous poem. Oh man, I'm forgetting his name, but it's essentially "Rage Against the Dying of the Light" or "Do Not Go Gently Into That Good Night." Dylan O'Thomas, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Is.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the myth of Sisyphus, where like do not go gently into that good night when we are moving that meaningless rock up the hill to rage against the fact that it's meaningless, to try our best to ascribe meaning into it, and despite knowing it's meaningless, to push that thing up the cliff or up the hill regardless. And I
Yeah,
love that.
so what I have here is that he argued that the answer wasn't nihilism,
Yeah.
but rather the fight against it. And I
love
love that.
Let's go.
I love that. He said that we should be defiant to the coldness of reality.
Yes.
That we should apply subjective meaning to the objective meaninglessness.
Yeah.
He's quoted in Sisyphus writing, "The struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart."
love
And
that,
that
yeah.
is the line. That
It is.
is what existing is.
Yeah.
We need to accept the reality that everything is just emptiness, that there is nothing with intrinsic value. And this is a practice that I like to do because I think, for me at least, it helps cement the ideas that the idea is true, and that is applying the logic of something I'm stress testing to the most extreme example. And that's what I'm about to do
I
here.
like that too. Yeah.
Is the love between you and your partner, between you and your kid, between you and your parents, it actually doesn't exist. That's all subjective. There's no intrinsic meaning to these people.
Yeah.
But there's meaning because you're attributed, and that's
Yeah.
what Camus saying. That's what he's saying we need to do. Don't just sit back and say, there's no intrinsic meaning to my mother, so therefore I shouldn't care. That doesn't matter if there's no intrinsic meaning. I have the power to apply, to give it meaning. And that's what we want to do. That's what the struggle of existence is finding the things that are worthy of you giving meaning.
Yeah. The fun part about all of that is one, truly feeling the liberation and freedom that gives you in the sense where nothing matters. So like you have nothing to lose with the meaning you want to apply to anything. Kind of reduces a lot of pressure. That like life is, you know, get a job and or all this stuff or move to New Zealand and just like, you know, hit trees down and build a log house and live by a river and call
Sounds
that
like a damn good time.
yeah, but like, you know, that's your thing. Your meaning to life could be making art. And that's a cool thing that I say making art because you are like, it's a very artistic approach to existence and existentialism where it puts the paintbrush in your hand and everything in front of you is a blank canvas and you
I think
can
it's
paint
so
it any color you
freeing.
want.
It's so
It is.
incredibly freeing.
It is.
Another idea that I had written down for him was that he was willing to talk about one of the most taboo subjects in humanity, which usually
Suicide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote that he said suicide is a real and logical question to ask when facing the absurd. And I think that's so important because we don't like to say that. that's
Yeah.
not an okay thing to go around saying that, hey, asking that question, that's a valid question. Most people be like, how would you even think of that? How would you even say that?
Yeah.
But he says, it's a valid question to ask. But then he goes on and ultimately concludes that it's the wrong answer.
Yeah. He has that famous quote that says there's only one really serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense. In the face of all of this, life is a lot. Life makes no sense. It's a lot. We're all Alice flying down this rabbit hole, trying to, splash our little paint of meaning into anything that we bump into. And it makes sense. And plus, on top of the struggles and all of that life will inevitably throw your way anyways, it makes sense,
Yeah, I have here
to have that feeling.
his conclusion is that the answer to the absurd is to face it without the illusions that would make it more palatable, to
Yes.
accept the absurd as truth yet find subjective meaning within
Yeah.
it.
There's a quote to like piggyback on that he says freedom is grounded in fact, not religious leaps of faith.
Yes, exactly, and that's another thing. I mean, we've let the cat out of the bag multiple times on the channel. We're both atheists, so we're gonna we're gonna be attracted to these guys that question religious thought a lot.
Yeah.
And then I just ended off my section on him with the idea of not blinking when staring into the void.
Yeah.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I stared into the void and it looked back, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. Batman.
Yeah.
There was another thing that he says that I like a lot, which is he argues that there's no perfect justice, and that we should ground justice in concrete compassion.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I think the issue of our criminal justice system is. It's that we seem to have a criminal justice system that relies too heavily on retribution and getting payback as opposed to justice. I think that justice should be the underlying thing. All these courthouses, all these places of law are adorned with the lady holding the scale with the blindfold on.
Yeah.
She's justice. Yet, are we really doing justice in these buildings when what we're doing is seeking revenge?
Yeah.
That's not what
The
it
whole
is.
retributive system.
Yeah, you touched on Batman, and even his like story was developing from seeking vengeance to seeking justice.
Exactly. Hope.
Yeah, it's that fundamental idea, I think, that just seems to be lost in the way we conduct criminal justice today.
Absolutely. For sure.
So that was Camus was your 7, my 6. So now we're at your number 6.
Okay. I have Kant.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I also wrote down about like phenomena versus noumena, which is a really cool concept. I'm gonna see if like there were some other things that I wrote that like you didn't touch on, which replacing religious authority with reason.
Yes.
Which is epic. The categorical imperative, which I love. It's if you're about to do something and you're like, should I do this? If quickly ask yourself, it's so simple. You just ask yourself, if everybody on the entire earth did this
Yeah.
also, is that a world I want to live in? I love that. It's simple. It makes sense. If you're about to lie, if you're about to cheat, if you're about to whatever it may be, what if everyone did this? Is that a world I want to be a part of? And like, sit with that. Sit with that for a moment. It's a beautiful tool. It's a beautiful ethics tool to just implement to your tool.
Yeah, it's an awesome litmus test. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fantastic. There was another thing I wrote about the kingdom of ends. So that concept had to do with treating humanity as an end, not just a means. And so, like, I think that works. Like practically, we should implement that. I know on like an objective level, it isn't really possible.
I think that a lot of things need to have that distinction.
Yeah,
and
correct.
They can be true in one and not true in the other, and still have
utility.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So like, just recognize if you're like using people or like your sole intentions are like to gain some end, rather than just be like, I want to be. Oftentimes, we hold the door open for people and we get pissed if they don't say, oh, thank you. We expect that back. We want that. We actually kind of, in a way, a lot of people need that. But instead, do something without expecting anything in return. Be okay with them not saying thank you. Treat these people as like, I'm doing a good deed because you're another fellow human and you deserve that kindness, not because you gave me anything back in return.
The end goal of doing good is doing good.
Exactly. And when that like kind of flickers in your brain and that kind of just resonates and marinates, a lot of your actions just automatically become nicer because you don't have to think anymore. The desirable end, it usually exists as a thought process in your brain because you're being calculative with your actions and trying to attain something. But when you simplify it to like, I'm just being nice because I it's my code. I need to be nice.
Yeah.
Your actions become knee jerk. It just becomes these automatic impulses of just being good for the sake of being good. And I love that. That's so important to me. And that if you're doing that actively and that's just a part of your character, you're just someone I want to be around.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah, that
Okay.
was it. That was what I wrote.
So for number 5 is a bit controversial to have him this low.
Okay.
And if I'm being honest, I wanted to put him lower.
Okay.
The only reason I have him at 5 is because I said this would be like keeping Shaq out of the top 5 of the NBA.
Okay.
I have Socrates.
Okay.
So first, I'm gonna preface it with why I have him lower on the list.
Wait, should we... Okay, because he's my 4.
Okay, so oh, that's great. Okay, so we can piggyback off of him and that's 5 and 4. However, now you skipped your 5, but
Yeah, I'll just go back.
yeah.
Should I do that or...
Yeah. When we
Okay.
finish talking about him, you go back
Let's
and
do
do your
it.
5.
Yeah.
So, anyways, the reason I have him at this low, even though so many people would say, but this is the founder of Western philosophy. This is the guy who started the thing you're sitting in this video talking about. How dare you have him this low? Likewise, I mean, Shaq was so influential to the game. Shaq is the best big man to ever be, but he couldn't shoot a free throw.
Let's hear it.
Socrates had no writings. You cannot be higher on this list if you never put the thoughts that you believed into form to pass on. That is the point of philosophy, is to share knowledge. And he didn't do that. Matter of fact, if it wasn't for his student, we wouldn't really know he existed.
Yeah, I think that's his biggest flaw. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think he was really tripped up on the whole I don't know anything, so if I write it down, that's like inferring I know something. But that's paradoxical because you're sharing. You're a teacher. You're sharing
he had
ideas, you knew
classes.
things.
He walked through
Yeah.
Athens with his students.
Maybe he was just like had really bad handwriting, was ashamed of it. You know, like
So I'm sure that a lot of guys back then had other people write their things as they paced the room and spoke.
yeah.
He should have done something.
Yeah.
I want Socrates' writings. And you know what? If this is a matter of like there was just lost knowledge, that maybe there were writings that we've just lost throughout the time because XYZ reason, like the sacking of the Library of Alexandria or whatever, then my bad, Socrates, you're awesome. But
Yeah, watch like they were so powerfully insightful that like the government had to hide it. Like the public can't know all this.
they're sitting underneath the Vatican right now.
right. All the and he like wrote hundreds.
Yes. Matter of fact, there's only Socrates in the Vatican vault. So
Go ahead.
my favorite thing of him, and I like the idea of the only thing I know is I know nothing at all. Super powerful, super insightful, super self-aware.
Yeah,
But
very honest.
one of my favorite things he ever said, it is a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable.
Yeah, I love that too. I love that so much. Honestly, we the human body is capable of insane things, and the feeling of health, the feeling of strength, speed, whatever it may be, we could be superheroes in the world, and like, you know, it's amazing. You can achieve that, you know. It's amazing.
It is. It's just such a powerful thing that I think more men need to really sit with.
I agree. Yeah.
Seeing your body fall apart is one of the saddest things, and then noticing that there is a point, there is a event horizon where once you pass that, there's never reaching that potential your body had. That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary. But yeah, I have that for him. I also
real fast, it just kind of I just thought of a random parallel. It's like we all have Ferraris, but like you never like let your foot like get on the gas.
Yeah.
You know, you never got to open up the engine and really see how fast that thing could go because It's amazing and it's beautiful when it does
Yeah, I
that.
think that's
And
one of
like,
that. That's an awesome parallel. I think it's like having a Ferrari that you just drive to the corner store every day at the speed limit.
yeah.
You never really enjoyed it. You never heard it purr.
Yeah, the human body, what we can do, the way joints work, muscles and tendons and ligaments, the way it all comes together as this super machine of complexity, and it's unbelievable. And see what it could do. See what it could do. We really should. We really should. It's because it's not only a fun endeavor, but like, you're able to have lots of positive impact through that endeavor as well.
Yeah. I also think that the label of martyr is a powerful label in history. Dying for what you believe is probably one of the most like baller things you could do.
Yes.
And that's Socrates.
Part of me was like, yeah, about the writing thing, but like that bumps him up a lot because like it's he's a model of intellectual martyrdom. Like
Yeah.
he accepted death rather than fleeing Athens
Yeah,
and
they
lived.
tried to have him break out. His students tried to break him out, and he said,
That's so
"Tomorrow's the night I go. It's
Yeah.
fine. Let him. I'll let them know that I still believe it when they're about to
This
do it."
man lived and died by his convictions. He was like
Yeah.
told, you're like corrupting the youth and all this stuff with your
Yeah, his
ideas.
charges. Those were actually his charges. His
Unbelievable.
charges were the corruption of the youth.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is insane.
Um,
That's tragic.
yeah.
But like it's
And if I'm not
It's
mistaken,
poetic.
one of those things was because he was saying like the pantheon of gods that went a thing.
probably that's fitting, but it's poetic and it's amazing. It's a way of us in the present being able to look at this person who's idolized in many ways and revered, and he's got that like you stood by these things that you shared, and that's beautiful, and that makes me want to learn more about what you said too, because you're literally learning about things a man decided to die by.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Entirely. Another thing that I find super insightful and forward thinking in his ideology is his criticisms of democracy. So I don't fully agree with them, but I see the logic. I see the logic. I see it.
Yeah.
This may not be popular to say, but I see the logic and the idea that we shouldn't give the power to vote to everyone.
I see that as well. It made sense. It makes sense on paper.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if we are making massive decisions that affect every single human in this country,
Then they should be made by those that are intellectually able to make such a decision.
yeah. But it's difficult to like, what does everyone have to like take some standardized test?
So-
Like, because and it's a slippery slope too.
Yeah.
Because we could apply that to pregnancy. Like that's another big thing that I think like belongs in the conversation, where you shouldn't be able to be a parent unless you can display that like you have XYZ
Ability.
skill sets.
Yeah. But the issue with that, the main issue with this is that it hands over so much power to a centralized government.
Yeah.
So it's no secret we're American. So we have that very enshrined idea of American value that we don't like big central government. We don't like it. I don't like one place having too much power.
Big brother.
It's not fun. We don't like it. We're over here and we're not under the British crown because we didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. And his idea and criticism of democracy essentially says that we are willing to give the power to the central government to be the arbiter of who is knowledgeable enough.
Yeah.
And that is something that the red, white, and blue in me just says no.
Yeah. So there's a quote that I love by him. It's "The unexamined life is not worth living."
Jeez. Yeah.
I also absolutely love this thing that I implement every single time that I enter a debate with someone, and it's called Socratic irony. It's adopting a stance of professed ignorance to draw others out conversationally, because sometimes the most effective way to help someone understand is not by telling them the answer, but by guiding them to discover it.
Yeah.
It's honestly like when someone has an idea, let's just assume it's true. Tell me more about this, and then ask questions that shine light on pit holes in it. Not say, look, you're wrong because of this thing, but shine a little gentle light that says, like, what about that?
You know, I think that this is something that is super important in like the spreading of philosophy, the spreading of knowledge, that people don't like to believe stuff when you tell them that what they believe is wrong. If you can make them believe that they've come to the conclusion that you already had themselves, it's so much more powerful.
Yeah.
It's so much more powerful if I can make you think that you came to this conclusion.
Yes.
I didn't give you the conclusion. You came to it.
Yeah.
It sits so much more real in that person's brain.
Yeah, it's honestly a lot of therapy adopts that posture a lot.
Yeah.
Where it's not telling someone what to believe, but it's it being a guiding light through questions and struggles that like help you to realize that it feels like the answer comes from within you with enough contemplation about the idea. It's just about shining the light in the right areas that help you come to that realization.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just works. It works with how most people will come to new ideas and realize that what they're believing is wrong. And I love that.
I also have for him the Socratic method is essentially the scientific method we use today.
Yeah.
His foundational framework for truth seeking is still being used today.
Yeah.
And to not have him in a top 5 at the very least when we still use his form of truth seeking seems criminal to me.
Yeah.
And I'll close it off by saying that he's at number 5 because everything we just said could easily just be a character made up by Plato.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So my number 5 happened to be David Hume.
Oh.
So the first thing that I wrote that I enjoyed about him was reason is a slave to the passions. Trying to be rational about everything is a special kind of madness. Reasons alone can't motivate us to act.
Okay.
This man was really big into like recognizing how important passion was in anything that we do, which I found fascinating. What did you think of that line?
Say it one more time.
So he says, reason is a slave to the passions. Passion comes first, reason comes kind of after. So, because you're not going to reason anything that the passion isn't kind of driven towards.
Yeah.
So he says that reason is a slave to the passions. Trying to be rational about this is paraphrasing, but trying to be rational about everything is a special kind of madness. Reasons alone can't motivate us to act. He kind of just highlights the idea that passions come first.
He does, and that is something that is so against the grain for me.
I know that. That's why I was very interested in like what you would say with this guy.
So I am someone who's driven by a super analytical view of reality. I want what I believe and what I strive to understand to be dissectable. I've come around to it, I'll say.
I noticed that.
I've come around to accepting passion, emotion, and experience as more valid than I did before, but I still have that hyper analytical view that I think takes precedence. And I suppose I've just gotten better with compartmentalizing when I need to use what skill. But if you were to ask me, I like reason.
So the next thing that he says is that reason can tell us facts, but it doesn't tell us what to care about. Like, for example, knowing that lying hurts people doesn't stop you from lying, but your empathy and moral feeling does. I found that cool.
Or
Are you about to pull the Sam Harris kind of like?
Yes, we pull morality from secular view.
Yeah.
Lying is not good for the prosperous endeavor of humanity that we all agree we should exist under. Therefore, we should not lie.
But we feel driven to that because of passion. That it fuels us. That like that's a good idea. That's what we should aspire to do. We're passionate about the idea.
No,
of
remember
human
when we were
flourishing.
touching on why species do what they do, why they Jeff Goldblum everything?
Yeah.
It's because the evolutionary process is tricking the consciousness into thinking that this is them doing it. When in reality, we are only acting in accordance with what the biology wants us to do.
Yeah.
There's the fact of it is lying is bad because it's not good for the continuance of humanity in its most optimal way.
Yeah.
Then the consciousness tricks us into thinking that we're doing this because we have empathy for someone, as opposed so that it makes that super dry pill of logic easier to swallow.
Yeah, I see that. I see. Do you think both can sort of exist in the same way?
They do. They both exist.
Yeah.
One, however, is the guise by which we make reality palatable.
Yeah, I understand that. I agree with that. Um, he said this one thing about like how hardly anything we do is ever truly rational. Most beliefs are justified simply because they work. They're useful to us. A test of this is interesting. This statement that I think I'm still like kind of like feeling out. A test of a belief isn't its probable truth, but its utility. So I think that like it makes sense that there are a lot of things that we may not fully know or understand 100%, but like they work. And so it's like, okay, let's keep doing this because it works. I think that simple philosophy, non-hyper intellectualized, can often just be like, what do we know, that we know, and all this stuff. But and that can become this like uh this never-ending kind of like rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But like some things just work within our human realm of just interaction. Like we can replicate a trillion of these if we want to, and we may not understand the full like underworkings in like to some crazy degree, but we can do this and it works, and we can interact with it.
Yeah.
And I think that like we can sometimes put our foot down in that sense and just be like, this is practical, this works, and this is the truth.
Yes. To, again, I think make the
Agree.
reality more palatable.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think that there's utility in trying to find these more emotional routes to conclusions
Yeah.
because it makes the harshness of reality palatable.
Yeah.
That's why I like so much that some of the guys we spoke about before, because they realize that truth and then say, but we should do these ways because it seems more practical to do them these ways. Hume seems to not acknowledge the actual truth, but rather wants to present the palatable approach as the objective truth. And that's where I think that I have a disagreement with Hume.
I wonder, I would need to like delve into that further to see like whether like how he would like respond to that.
Yeah.
But I definitely see what you're saying, and I agree with that. I think that like the people that we spoke of before definitely kind of like pull back that veil of
like Camus with his whole, hey, life's meaningless, but give it some meaning. He's not saying life has meaning. I think that that's more akin to what Hume does.
Yeah, I see that. He was an empiricist. He believed that all knowledge is derived from the senses. That like we don't just come into reality with like knowledge per se.
Yeah.
That we're kind of this blank slate. That like all those things that we may act on are kind of like impulse or just like biological reaction, not necessarily knowledge. He also didn't believe that like identity exists. That like it's an illusion. That it's just kind of like a bunch of I forgot how he worded it, but like a bunch of things together that are just constantly moving and changing. And so there is no seated essential I. I don't know if we really went into that with Sam Harris, but like Sam is a big champion of the idea that identity is an illusion, and when you meditate, that kind of disappears. That like when you go to like look for this I that is seated within you,
There is nothing.
Yeah, it's like peeling back layers of an onion. There's no core. You're just gonna be left with layers, and you're just like I don't know what I'm even looking for. Like the feeling that there is an I is kind of just this, it's just another form of conscious awareness. It's just taking on the form of like a feeling, but that's just this fleeting feeling. That's not you.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I think he said that morality is based on feelings, not reason, which I think that like, yeah, but that can kind of, I think that in many ways that ties into like Agent just wants to be happy.
Yeah.
But
again, I think that's the guise that the consciousness plays on itself.
It is fully. I agree with that. Yeah.
Not an actual observation of reality, but rather the vehicle by which consciousness makes itself think.
Yeah, it's a shadow displayed on the wall by like our conscious awareness.
Ooh, we'll get into shadows on the wall a little bit.
Yes, we will.
So my number 4 is John Locke. This will be my last political philosopher in this, but John Locke, a lot like Thomas Paine that I spoke about earlier, had a lot of those same ideas, but I just feel like John Locke kind of hammered them home a bit more, and having them both in my top 10 would have felt like double dipping. And if I had to choose one, I picked John Locke. He had the fundamental idea that the power given to government is granted by the people being governed, not some deity or derived through heredity. And I think that's so important. It's fundamental to, again, how the US has established its system of governance, that the power is given to the government by the people, and we at any point have the power to take that power back if they're not doing what we're telling them we want them to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's fundamentally the one of the biggest and most important ideas for good government, for running a country the best way you can, is to realize that the power is in the people, not the government. The crown has no power over me. I have let it wear the crown.
Yeah.
I've allowed him to.
The collective moral standards of a people,
Yeah.
that is going to determine the outcomes of a country.
Yeah, and when we look at it, First and Second Amendment are in a lot of ways teachings of John Locke. It's the right of the government is given to it by the people. The people have a right to criticize the government, First Amendment. We have a right to be displeased. And in the situation where the government does not align with what we've wanted them to do, we have the power to overthrow them, Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And I just find it one of those just fundamental building blocks. Another one he has is he was a big voice for what he called, or what we all call and realize now to be, inalienable rights. He listed them as life, liberty, and property. Those are the things that are a right that is intrinsic to a citizen of a country. It is not granted to them by a government. It is not granted to them by a religious figure. It is not granted to them by anything. It is something that we are born with and are granted as a result of being a citizen of said country. And I think that's so extremely fundamental. He argued that these rights cannot be taken by the government. They are awarded by nature, God, if you're religious, for sure. But his answer was they're awarded to people by nature. You have the right to life, you have the right to liberty, and you have the right to pursue property. I already touched on that he believed that we have the right to overturn the government if it isn't carrying out its sole purpose to protect the natural rights. He was a big proponent of the division of church and state, right to bear arms. So a lot of our Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, is heavily credited to John Locke. He also said that religious freedom is fundamental. He said people cannot accurately conclude the validity of one religion over another. So the centralized government should not be allowed to legislate it. And I think that's super important.
So everything you just said about John Locke really reminded me a lot of Sam Harris's Moral Landscape. And that really just seems like essential components that have to exist to a governing body to ensure that social flourishing is just present,
Yeah.
They just seem like fundamental tenets to a modernized world that people and their government exist as this cohesive thing that works towards just being prosperous.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. I just think that he, in a lot of ways, is the pioneer of what American values are. So I don't want to make this sound like I'm saying that America is perfect. I think it's far from it. But I think that we have devised the best rule book. I think our Constitution is written in such a way that it constitutes, for a lack of a better word, the best framework for how a country should be run. Now, do we follow that writing to the T? We don't, and that's why I think we have issues. But the writing itself, I think, is the best rule book for governance that has ever been written.
Yeah, for sure. I see that.
All right. What was your number 4?
My number 4, it was Socrates.
Okay, so you're at number 3 now.
Yeah. All right, I got Aristotle.
Oh, that's my 3 as well.
Nice. Okay, so
our 3, 2, and 1 might be exactly the same. Let's just stick with 3 for now.
They are. They are the same. Let's go for it.
All right, go 3.
So like Plato, the highest goal for humans was eudaimonia, which is achieved through the cardinal virtues. I think that's amazing. Cardinal virtues: wisdom, temperance, courage, and what is that one I'm missing? Wisdom, courage, temperance, and wisdom. Oh, I said wisdom. I forget the fourth, but anyways, I love that. I think that that's like a piece. Yeah, I'm missing one. What is that? Let me see that.
Justice.
Justice. Okay. Yeah, I think that's incredible. They both had that as the main goal for humans is that.
Yeah,
What's your
100%.
take on eudaimonia?
Yeah, I think that it's just another word that a bunch of philosophers have used different words to try to describe the same thing. And I think this is just another philosopher's take on it, but it's that end goal. It's what we are striving for, and it's what we need to continue striving for. It's the thing that we need to keep trying, and that's the end goal we're all trying to get to.
Yeah, definitely. What's your first thing you wrote for him?
So for him, I have syllogism. The,
it's the
deductive reasoning, I think, is one of the fundamental ideas of argumentation, and it's one of the easiest ways to assess the validity of a claim. So the whole, if A is B and C is A, then C is B.
I think that's arguably his most important contribution to philosophy.
Yeah, 100%. It's the ultimate litmus test for almost any proposition.
Yeah.
Do your premises constitute your constitution, your conclusion?
Yeah. And he expanded more on that too, because like he also established the scientific method of analysis, observation, ask a question, research, hypothesis, test it, and draw a conclusion.
Yeah,
like that comes from him, which is insane.
Yeah, 100%. This is all he's built a lot of what we practice to this day.
Yeah,
a lot of what we use through deduction is him.
Yeah.
I also have his whole ethos, pathos, and logos thing. I think it's super important.
Of course.
It's it's the framework of Aristotelian ethics.
Yeah.
Ethos being our ethics, pathos being our emotions, and logos being the logic.
Yeah.
Those three pillars of being are what seems to be fundamental to good living, to being a good person, to being virtuous, which I think gets into the next idea that I have for him, which is virtue. Yeah. I think that Nicomachean Ethics is probably one of the most influential works in the field of virtue.
Yeah.
Trying to establish what is virtuous and what isn't virtuous, how to lead a virtuous life, and what that looks like. The golden mean is probably so good because we all seem to think of there are good things and there are bad things. Being generous is good. Well, sure, but if you're too generous, that's not good.
Yeah.
If you're not generous enough, you're not good either.
Yeah.
So his idea of putting it on a scale where the virtue that you are talking of, let's continue using generosity as the example, there is a vice of depletion and a vice of excess. For every single virtue that exists, there are those two extremes. And to lead a virtuous life, we must find them all in that mean, in that middle part.
Yeah.
And I just find that to be so important for leading a virtuous life.
Yeah, most things just exist on a spectrum, and it really brings into focus that truth, which I love, about him and seeing that. I think it's pretty epic. He founded the Lyceum. Am I pronouncing that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Lyceum, or people would just come and gather and debate on things. I think that creating an open space where people can do that is we need that. We need more of that.
100%.
That's what I think a modern day Lyceum would be like. YouTube, for instance. What we're doing right now is just creating a space, but feels more detached. But I wish a modern day kind of version existed like that, where like literally come here and just talk about ideas. That would be epic.
I think that this might be controversial, but I think Elon's take on X seems to be a platform for free speech.
It is,
a platform for people to come. And of course, I mean, this isn't going to be a breakdown of the ethics of Elon, but Of course, when you allow free speech, there are going to be bad eggs who are saying bad things that we don't agree with. But to silence the bad things is presupposing that someone should be the arbiter of what is bad, and that's just a scary.
And I get into like Mill's philosophy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's not on
no
my
free
list, but
speech.
yes.
Not on my list either.
But I just brought up here a list quickly to like talk about that golden medium that Aristotle talks about in his Ethics. He has courage, which is the virtue, but its vice of excess being rashness, his vice of deficiency being cowardice. Temperance has intemperance being the vice of excess, and insensibility the vice of deficiency. High ambition or right ambition has over ambition, and want of ambition. Good temper has irritability, and then spiritlessness. All these things that can sound good always exist on the two extremes, and we
Yeah.
need to continue to try to fight to keep it in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, and just recognize, have the self-awareness to recognize whether we are within a vice. I love learning about that, about like how something that's good can, too much of that, like anything else, it could be too much water, too much exercise, whatever it may be, that vices do exist, and to recognize when a good will exist when it's in the balance, and balance is just everything, as cliche as it sounds.
I also like his because he has multiple works, and one of them is on the arts. So he has obviously his book of math, his book of the sciences, his book
Yeah.
on ethics, his book on politics,
Biology.
biology, metaphysics. But his book on arts, I think, has a cool perspective on what the arts are. And a lot, this honestly might be something that Da Vinci pulled from reading Aristotle. Because, as we know, the Renaissance was the reawakening of the classical philosophies, and that's what led to the Renaissance, is breaking out of those dark ages and rediscovering the teachings of early philosophers during the classical period. And so it is likely that a lot of what Da Vinci was saying with art stems from this. But anyways, long-winded side note is that he said that the arts are reinforcing and cleaning up our view of the world. He said that tragedies, so plays that are tragics, can seem illogical, that we like to watch those things. Why do we like to see someone in a situation of misfortune? And he said it helps us understand the bad things can happen and will happen to good people, and we should not look down on a man based on his circumstance. He essentially was saying that the stories we see in plays and even today in movies is just helping us reinforce the empathy for people.
Yeah.
You want a good story always constitutes the character going through hardship, not because we're evil and want to see the main character have hardship, but because that's relatable, because that's real, because we know that, like he said, good things can and will happen to people.
Yeah.
And that helps cultivate that empathy, because sometimes we do need that proxy to look at empathy, because it is harder to do it with real situations. But when we look at a story of someone that has been through these things, it's easier to have that empathy. And I just think that view on art is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. When we, see ourselves as the hero of the story, we see ourselves in characters, and that's what can make it so enjoyable. Is like through that hardship, it's like we can see a reflection of ourselves. We can see parts of ourselves that exist equally as a deficit that we are, seeing in a character.
Yeah.
Like whoever it may be. There are always relatable traits, and it helps us. I think we can understand ourselves more deeply through, looking at reading about fictional characters.
Yeah, 100%. I think that that's why so many of these fictional characters are so influential in culture. I mean, just using me as an example with Batman, it's one of the driving forces of my early learning of ethics. A lot of my early ethics were derived from this character, and until I started learning about it, like actual philosophers, he was my uh, figure of what ethics and being good was.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks so heavily to Aristotle's view on what the dramas and the arts can bring to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so to our like number 2.
Yeah.
Say it at the same time. 3, 2, 1. Plato.
Yeah.
All right. So I have eudaimonia with him.
Okay.
Human flourishment, fulfillment, and yeah, we touched on it earlier, but essentially the same idea. I also have that he, in a lot of ways, adopted and further developed Socrates' ideas of democracy. He also said that people shouldn't vote unless they are smart enough to do so,
Yeah.
which I already said why I don't agree with in practice, but in
Yeah.
theory sounds logical.
Theory does make sense. Yeah.
Established the first place of higher learning in the West, lasted about 300 years.
Insane.
Yeah. It served as the inspiration for the eventual Medici establishing the Platonic Academy of Florence. So Plato, obviously the Platonic Academy.
Yeah.
Plato's Platonic Academy was the first, what we can call somewhat university of the West. And that was lost during the Dark Ages. Places of higher learning weren't really a thing. And Plato was extremely progressive in how that worked. It's surprising. There's like records of women even attending the Platonic Academy.
That's awesome.
He was open to just sharing knowledge,
Yeah.
at least from what we can understand. Maybe that wasn't entirely the case, and I'm sure that there are parts of it that don't resonate with modern values. But to see that even some modern values are reflected is insane. And again, these guys, so we have Plato, Aristotle, and earlier we named Socrates. These guys are those fundamental builders. To see that when their thoughts and ideas came to an end, we started entering the age of human darkness. The Dark Ages, the worst period in human history, started when these guys stopped thinking.
Yeah.
And then the Renaissance, the era of reawakening, of reimagining, comes because their teachings were rediscovered and re-explored.
Yeah.
I don't think you can have any of the three of them outside of a top five ever, because
Correct.
they're so influential in what is good in humanity.
Correct. Fully agree. The first thing that I had by him that resonated with me
I
so
think I
much.
know what it's going to be.
It's got because it's philosophy in a nutshell is the allegory of the cave.
100%.
You got to have that. It's you know, realizing that so much of what we look at is just bias or illusion, whatever it may be. And with the tools of reason, with the tools of logic and philosophy, are we able to see things closer to what they truly are and to live in accordance with the greater good and achieve eudaimonia and be able to, grab the steering wheel of our ship and like take it to where we want to go to a prosperous place. That's so important. It really is a beautiful depiction of what philosophy is and what it always will be.
Yeah, 100%. I also have in here that he suggested that our leaders should always be versed in philosophy.
Philosopher King concept.
The Philosopher King, yes.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is a common nickname for my number one.
Yes. Who could that be?
Who could that be? But anyways, before we go on to him, the allegory of the cave is, I think, such a cool story that parallels how ignorance in the world, and I don't mean ignorance in a degrading way, but rather just in the most simple version of its definition, that it's the absence of knowing.
Yeah, we all have it.
Yeah.
In so many different ways.
Definitely. Ignorance can blind us. When he returned to the cave and told them, what you're looking at are just shadows of what is real, they didn't believe him.
No. Thought he was crazy. He was like, come up, like, look what I found. And it's like there's a whole world out there, and that's literally what philosophy really feels like. Is everything you see so differently. Imagine seeing the world right now, but never having learned anything about philosophy the way you see it.
It's crazy, yeah. Needless to say, Plato, number 2.
Yeah.
And now we move on to the Philosopher King.
Let's go.
The last good emperor. The last one of the era of Pax Romana, which is Latin for Roman peace.
The dude didn't even want to be emperor.
He didn't.
He was groomed.
Yeah.
Well, by
he was picked.
Emperor Hadrian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was picked, and given the last names that he had, I don't think that was his original last name. He was adopted by the reigning emperor and groomed him to be the next emperor, and led Rome into the last couple years of its highest might, even though he faced the ooh, I'm forgetting the name of the plague that was going on during the time. There was a big plague. There was a war with the invasion on the north.
Hmm.
He handled all this with grace and led Rome through the final years of its best period in history, the Pax Romana.
Yeah.
Needs no introduction. Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
I could speak so much, so much on this guy.
Yeah.
But
He's definitely made the biggest impact on our lives, obviously, with
Yeah.
Stoicism being the first, like, just biggest thing that he carried himself with throughout his entire uh, ruling. You know, um, it's incredible that this man. Something I always like to think about is ask yourself if you could do anything, right? Would you still choose to be good? Would you still choose not to overindulge? Would you still choose to wake up early despite it being cold and you're comfy in there to get up and do some harsh duty that entails discomfort, but you know what's right, like, because of that blueprint that you utilize, and he did that, and I think that is just incredibly admirable.
100%. Just touching on what I said earlier, it was the Antonine Plague.
Well, which one was it?
Antonine.
Okay.
The Antonine Plague during that period, and he was facing some of the toughest issues that Rome faced, yet continued to have Rome work at its optimal rate during his period. Um, I have his views on death being one of my favorite of any philosopher, and I have a quote here from him. It is not death that a man should fear, but never having had lived. Death smiles at us all a man can do is smile back, at all times awaiting death, with the glad confidence that it is nothing more than the dissolution of the elements of which every living creature is composed. Now, if there is nothing fearful of the elements themselves in their ever constant change of each other into another, why should one look anxiously in prospect at that change and dissolution of them all?
Yeah.
I think it's just his viewpoints into existing are so profound.
They are.
They beyond his time again, which is something that is just constant with all the people we've spoken about, but it's just so incredibly beyond his time. So where I don't think there is a single thing in Meditations, his book, which if you haven't read, you should. It's just, in my opinion, the best piece of writing put together.
His journal, I'm always astounded by the idea that he never even intended for that to be published. That was his private book that he would write into to, like,
Yeah.
keep his hands on the
So
guardrails.
initially, this was going to be, which is, I think, the one failure of his life. He wrote Meditations for his two sons to read so that they could be good emperors. And he ended up dying before he could give it to them. And that's why Commodus essentially started the downfall of the Roman Empire.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But I think what's beautiful is, like, if he only knew the hands that, like, the amount of hands that it's now in that has created a positive change, I think he'd be happy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think something that people often overlook is that for the first portion of his rule as emperor, he was a co-emperor. He and his stepbrother were co-emperors of Rome. And he intended for his two sons to be co-emperors when he eventually stepped down or passed away. And one of his sons ended up passing and left Commodus alone, which played a role in how Commodus ended up ruling.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think another one here, I just have quotes from him because there's just so much. But I have his view on anxiety, which is something that I deal with often. And this quote is one that is almost just etched in my brain because it helps me deal with almost any bit of anxiety I have of anything. And it's, do not fear the future, for you will face it if need be with the same weapons of logic and reason with which you are armed and you face today.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. If we look at anything that we're scared for that's coming up or that will come up or that can come up, anything, what you're armed with today, the tools you have refined through the practice of stoicism, they'll be there when this thing comes, and
Yeah.
you'll deal with it just like you're dealing with the problems you're facing right now.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes a lot of the problems that we deal with today, tomorrow, we've already dealt with. They've just kind of shapeshifted a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're just feeling those familiar emotions again. And we just have
Entirely.
to utilize what we once utilized, and except they're sharper this time because they've battled the same different things before. And, we're going at it. I think one of my favorite quotes that I'll just never forget, because it's just like, it's one of the most important quotes of my entire life, is the first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The
Yes.
second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. That for me is just like a absolute bare bones, like, this is how I need to live my life. Is one, keep an untroubled spirit, because if you don't have your cool, if you're not calm and collected, you'll never be able to see things as they are.
Yeah.
Because everything's clouded by emotion. It's all going to be shape shifted in ways that aren't actually true and out of alignment. And if you want to live rightfully, if you want to live in accordance with the good, you have to be seeing clearly. And one of the biggest parts of stoicism is like, keep your cool and act well.
Yeah.
And I think that just speaks to me. I love it. I love it because it's so damn simple, but it's so damn profound at the same time.
100%. 100%. I haven't found another school of thought that brings me so much peace when existing brings so much angst.
Yeah.
There's nothing that brings the level of calmity that Stoicism does,
Yeah.
and more specifically, Marcus's brand of Stoicism.
Yeah,
because there's
same.
other Stoic philosophers, but
Yeah.
none of them have resonated the way this guy did.
Correct.
I think some of the thoughts that he just had with taking into consideration his position as an emperor
Yeah.
is crazy. I'm paraphrasing. I don't have this quote written down, but I know that in Meditations he says something along the lines of, if I am wrong, I'm willing to listen and change my mind.
Yes.
To have an emperor of Rome have that level of humility is insane.
And to like piggyback on that, the way he opens with Meditations,
Yes.
is by literally giving thanks to the people he holds close to him and those around him that he just learned from. Like, each person, he finds positive things of, my temperance I gained from my mother, or whoever it may be, and all these just
Wisdom
different people.
from his teacher.
Yeah.
He goes into detail, not only giving credit, but again showing that level of humility that this isn't me. I didn't do this.
There's no self-made man. That everything
Yeah.
that is admirable in me is because I had some admirable person around me.
Yeah, it's insane and it's beautiful. And honestly, we're gonna link in the description of this video our favorite edition of Meditations, because I think anyone who hasn't read it is doing themselves a disservice.
There's actually this one. I don't think that you have the annotated version.
That's
It's
the
like
one I
not-
was talking about.
Oh yeah,
That's the one I was talking
because
about.
honestly, the first like version is like going to be hard to understand, but this annotated version essentially takes the modernized English, right? But then it breaks it down fully into like, what did he mean by this? Where was he coming from? What is the historical context and situation?
Essentially, it'll show you a section of his writings, and then it'll have an explanation.
Yeah.
Next section, next explanation.
little footnote of like a whole explanation for it.
It's
amazing.
it's the most digestible and approachable version of Meditations,
It is.
and I just urge anybody listening, if you ever take anything away from anything I ever say,
Yeah.
read that book.
Definitely. It's timeless. Whatever, and everything said in it is going to be applicable 2,000, 100,000 years from now.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That concludes our list.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
Please tell us in the comments how terribly wrong we are and how every single person we listed is out of order and you could do it better, and tell us.
Yeah, do your own order in the comments. We'd love
Yeah.
that. But thank
All right.
you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.